It is a Wednesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and oh no, I'm so negative, I've been told. My realism is downright pessimistic. Well, we'll find some positivity on this Wednesday edition of the show, but I gotta be honest with you, for a team that led the league in pace last year, one of the last things I wanted to hear was that the team had to go even faster. We're gonna talk about that and more on this edition of the podcast. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, once again your host. That means once more I am flying solo. No to Michael Cole. He is there on the ground in Nashville, but he's doing so much work for the commercial appeal there in Nashville, covering this Grizzlies team at Belmont University. You might have seen on X at the Michael C. He's on Grind City Media. He's doing all sorts of different things. He's a busy guy. He's going to be back with us on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Grizzlies. But make sure you're following all his work at DeMichael C. over at the Commercial Appeal. DeMichael will be back with us tomorrow. Thank you so much again for being with me on this edition of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 of bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can hang out with me, DeMichael, both of us at the same time when we're able to be the dynamic duo riding once more. I promise the sun will shine once more on Locked On Grizzlies with both of us together. But for now, I'm happy to take you through the next 30 or so minutes talking Memphis Grizzlies basketball. And day one is in the books. Check that box. The Grizzlies have completed a practice in Nashville under Tuomas Isalo, the first practice ever and in the Tuomas Isalo era, officially. And there's all sorts of reasons for positivity, right? Hope springs eternal this time of year. It was true in training camp for the NFL. It's true in the NBA. Zion Williamson looks thin. Maybe this is the year he figures it out, right? Gee, gosh, golly, this is going to be the time. The other 6 years, we're going to completely ignore how those ended. Year number 7, that's going to be the charm. We're all guilty of it. Memphis Grizzlies fans, I would argue, are guilty of it to an extent, and we'll talk a little bit about that here momentarily. But it is good to hear Joe Morant after a practice say it was his best first day of his NBA career. It was good to see the team be in good spirits, and we'll talk more about those positive vibes later on in the show. But at the risk of being accused of being negative again, I had a wonderful interaction with several of our commenters on YouTube yesterday. Thank you to everybody who chimed in. I'm not expecting everyone to agree with me. I'm not expecting everybody to look at my or listen to my basketball takes and think, you know what, that Joe Mullinax is right 100% of the time. Because you know what? I'm not right 100% of the time. But you know what else is true? I have been following this team as a blogger, as a podcaster, whatever the case might be, since 2013. That means I am going into my 12th or 13th season covering this team. Whether it's Grizzly Bear Blues or Bluff City Media or SB Nation or Locked On Podcast Network, I've watched a lot of Memphis Grizzlies basketball. So you may not like every take that I have, but I've got experience, people. And I have watched a heck of a lot of what this era under Ja Morant has been. And I got to tell you, as much as I want to have a sunshiny day, for a team that was first in the National Basketball Association in pace in the regular season, for them to come out with the moniker Speed Kills, it didn't do a lot for me. Now, in fairness, and again, I try to be fair as best I can, Tuomas Isalo has reiterated that this Speed Kills mantra, this idea of prioritizing speed, it's not just connected to pace, how fast you play the game. It's how you process information. It's the reads that you make. It's almost a philosophy. It's a lifestyle in a way, at least within the basketball world of the Memphis Grizzlies. And I do think that is a different message than what Taylor Jenkins conveyed. That tweak is a notable one. And I do think that when you hear numerous players build up and preach and appreciate the style of practice that Isolo ran. The media, DeMichael and other media that were assembled there in Nashville, spoke with Santi Aldama and John Morant. They both talked about how they liked the way the practice flowed and how it felt like they were moving faster, not just in terms of running up and down the court, but in terms of the efficiency at which their drills were conducted, the schedule itself. Maybe Isolo is an organizational machine, and we should give him credit for that. I should give him credit for that. But where I struggle, and if you're an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies, which hopefully you are, and if you're not, hopefully you become one today. Where I struggle, if you've been a part of our Locked On Grizzlies corner of the internet for a while, one of my biggest issues with the 2024-2025 Memphis Grizzlies was turnovers. I hate turnovers. Love apple turnovers. Love pizza turnovers. Turnovers in baked good form, big fan. Turnovers in sports, in my opinion, kill offensive efficiency. And yes, in the interest of full disclosure, I am a football guy. I'm a football coach. So when possessions are limited in a football game, the margin is magnified. It's that much more significant. So could Tuomas Isolo, who his literal profession is basketball, sit me down and talk to me like I'm 5 years old, because I deserve it, and explain to me that there's more possessions in a basketball game and therefore those turnovers are not as significant? Maybe so. But I would argue it's all about percentages and proportions. Proportionality dictates that if you have, 8 or 9 possessions in a football game and you lose 2 of them, that's 2 fewer opportunities to score. That's a little less than 20%. If you have 105 possessions in a basketball game or 110 possessions in a basketball game and you turn the ball over 18 times, the percentage ain't that much different. And one of the biggest differences between football and basketball, where I would argue turnovers in a basketball game are significant, is in football, it is not nearly as simple on an interception or a fumble recovery to score the touchdown or to score points in general. There are fewer opportunities because you can't recover a fumble and then drop kick it and get 3 points on a field goal attempt. It's either a scoop and score, pick six, or it's just a turnover on possession. You turn the ball over on a live ball play in basketball, and there's a 3-point play opportunity. There's actually numerous ways you can have a 3-point play opportunity. Numerous ways you can have a 2-point play opportunity. You can get fouled. You can convert a bucket. And those are points that you lose that also lead to swings in the other direction, and it happens that much more quickly. So when I hear it's a philosophy when it comes to speed, and it's prioritizing decision-making being quicker, there's going to be some growing pains that go along with that, dear listener, dear viewer. You're going to see increased turnover rates from this team early on as they get accustomed to this way of playing basketball, if this is the method they are going to choose. Oh, Joe, the Indiana Pacers chose this system, and they make fast choices, and they were similar in terms of pace to the Grizzlies. The Indiana Pacers have a lot of different types of players that aren't necessarily the same as the Memphis Grizzlies. And the Indiana Pacers had to win a literally ridiculous amount of clutch games just to get where they got in the NBA Finals. That type of run may never happen again. It hadn't happened prior to it happening last year. Joe, you're being a hater. I am trying to be realistic about what is the goal here. If the goal is to score more points than the other team, we saw the offense in terms of pace have a lot of success at times last year. We've talked about it before. The main reason Taylor Jenkins isn't here anymore is likely more to do with his defense, where he hung his hat as a scheme tactician, being where things fell apart. Can the team take this higher rate of processing? Can they make these choices, especially with a starting lineup where if it is John Morant, Jalen Wells, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, we'll talk about Santi Aldama here in a moment, and Jock Landale to start the season, who are you trusting to make those high rate of speed decisions? And I'll do you one better. You're telling me that Jaren Jackson Jr., who is conspicuous by his absence in some of these conversations early on in the training camp process here, Jaren Jackson Jr., the clear, potentially best player on the team, at worst, second best player on the team, that guy who doesn't pass the basketball enough as it is, you're telling me that he is going to take this increased focus on making quick decisions? He hasn't made a quick decision passing out of the post consistently, maybe ever. So I am not going to wholesale sign off on this going faster and speed kills. Yes, to an extent that is true. You want to outflank your opponent, and speed is one of the most natural ways to do so. But it can't come at the expense of costing yourself offensive opportunities because you're making choices so quickly that you're not able to fully see what's happening in front of you on the opposing end of the court when it comes to the defense. Let me know on X, at Joe Mullinax. Hit me up in the comments. Again, I was told I was being too negative yesterday. Maybe I'm being negative again today. I'm not as excited about this speed kills philosophy because they already went pretty fast in terms of pace. And if you want to talk about processing speed, and one of the things, when you rush decisions, sometimes turnovers are a problem. That's a problem for me. But maybe they can learn and grow and figure it out before it's too late in the regular season and they're trying to play catch up to teams in the standings. It's a lot harder to catch those guys with speed. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, Santi Aldama spoke to the media after practice on Tuesday. He was asked about potentially playing the 5, given the Grizzlies' big man issues. That conversation went about as well as you'd expect. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you will unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, you can try player props, you can even follow live lines during games and hop into the action whenever you see fit. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today, and get started. So Santi Aldama met with the media, as I mentioned a moment ago, as did Joe Morant. And the idea of Santi potentially being a 5 was brought up. And DeMichael Cole, in my conversations, I'm lucky to have a chance to talk to DeMichael pretty regular. I don't mean to name drop, but you guys know DeMichael Cole, co-host of Locked On Grizzlies. In my chat with DeMichael today, he talked about how Santi was asked about playing the 5 and how that conversation went over like a lead balloon. Not necessarily disrespectful. I want to stress that. Santi hasn't been that kind of guy really ever in his career with the Memphis Grizzlies. It's one of the reasons that he signed an extension with Memphis. One of the reasons the Grizzlies were willing to give him that money. It's a fit. Culturally, personality-wise, Santi loves Memphis. Memphis loves Santi. Match made in heaven, right? Santi is 6'11". You may or may not know that. Spoiler alert. Santi is very tall. And when you look at Santi's frame, you envision him being the kind of player that has the capacity to play the 5 because of his body at 6'11", 200 some pounds. Surely he could be one of the options that the Grizzlies toy around and pick and prod with, given their current front court issues. Likely no Jaren Jackson Jr. to start the season. It's possible he plays. Likely no Jaren. Certainly no Zach Edey. Certainly no Brandon Clark. So we talked about Jock Landale earlier in the show, and he'll be one of our positive notes here later on in the podcast. But if you're not super stoked to see Jock Landale starting center for the Memphis Grizzlies, I get it. Landale is one of those guys that doesn't need the ball in his hands to be impactful. He's like a lesser Steven Adams. But at the same time, he's not Steven Adams. And you don't necessarily get fired up to have a guy that doesn't have the same physical capabilities doing the things that are necessary that the guy that you moved on from 2 years ago has. You're not going to be super stoked about that. You're just not. At least you shouldn't be. I'm not super stoked. What I am intrigued by is how Santi is so readily focused on not being a 5. Not necessarily because he won't do it if Coach Isolo asks him to, but because he sees himself as a more perimeter-based big. And in fairness to him, yes, that is the true way to look at it. Santi is a stretch 4 in every sense of the word. He doesn't have a back down game. He doesn't really have a pick and roll game to speak of where he's in the dunker spot trying to finish at the rim. That's not Santi Aldama. When you think Santi Aldama, you think of a lot of the types of skill sets that you would see from a perimeter player, a wing, a guard. Maybe not quite a guard. Maybe I'm going a little too far there. But certainly a wing, the ability to handle, the ability to create offense in isolation. He does a lot of things scoring the ball that Jaren Jackson Jr. also does. And Jaren is viewed widely as a perimeter big. He's attacked in the low post more in recent years, especially this past season. But Jaren really thrives on the perimeter, and so does Santi Aldama. So, is Santi Aldama more of a 3 than a 5? I think that's utterly ridiculous, personally. Why do I think that's utterly ridiculous? Because I've watched Santi Aldama play defense. And I have said on this podcast, and I will continue to say on this podcast, that if Santi wants to project to being an actual true impact player that can do things on both ends of the court to help a team win, he would develop his strength more, and he would become a better screener, and he would be a better 5, having that role as a center, as a big. But Santi is clearly not interested in that. And again, Santi is good at what he does. But Santi playing the 3 spot as a 6'11", essentially big, that lacks the lateral quickness to compete with other perimeter players in the modern NBA, it's frustrating to watch a 6'11" guy not be able to play the center position. And maybe, and again, I'm trying, in the interest of fairness, maybe I am feeling about Santi in this moment the way that some of you feel about Jaren Jackson Jr. when it comes to his lack of rebounding. Santi, you could argue, is a better rebounder than Jaren. But I look at Santi and I see his frame and I think, dude, you're a big. Go be a big. Why are we talking about you being a perimeter-based guy when the team is struggling so mightily for front court depth? Some of you complain about Jaren's rebounding. Jaren, you're 6'11", 245. Go be a big. Go attack the glass. And yet, he doesn't do it, at least not on a consistent enough basis where it's a part of his game that you can depend on. Santi Aldama can shoot the 3. That's a part of his game that Memphians can depend on. Santi Aldama can create off the bounce. That is something that Grizzlies fans can depend on. Can Santi Aldama be a guy, if your goal is to start your best players, as old friend of mine, do my Grizzly Bear Blues podcast or blogging days, Matt Hardlicka wrote about in his Patreon. If the goal is to play your best guys, and Santi Aldama is one of your best guys, and it needs to slide in as a 3-man to get him on the court, maybe that conversation needs to be had. But I really struggle with the lack of positional versatility that we see from Santi if he is not able to play that 5-man role. Not because I need him to be Dikembe Mutombo. Not because I need him to be somebody like Nikola Jokic as a passer and creator out of the block. I just need him to be big. Set a screen. Be a physical presence. Use the frame that you have been gifted to go and be a physical attack point on both ends of the floor. That's not the kind of game that Santi Aldama plays. I get it. But we're looking for development, right? That was one of the great strengths of Taylor Jenkins, wasn't it? Developing talent. If Tuomas Isolo is going to be of the same mindset and of the similar ilk in terms of developing players, you can dislike Taylor Jenkins all you want. His coaching staffs were excellent at developing talent. It's really hard to argue anything other than that. Santi Aldama needs to develop into a more versatile player that can fill that space. Because for two things to be true at the same time, A, the Memphis Grizzlies have a front court problem and they really struggle at the center position at the moment. And B, there's a 6'11" guy on the roster who's not a center or can't even play significant minutes in that space because he doesn't have the skill set or the mentality that connects to it. That's hard for me to swallow personally. Doesn't mean that Santi's a bad basketball player. Doesn't mean that he shouldn't have signed a contract extension. For me, it's what can you do to help the team get through this rough patch? And Santi is either not mentally or physically in a place where he can fill that void, or at least play a small part in helping fill that void. That can be concerning, at least for me, heading into the rest of training camp and starting with preseason games soon. Hit me up on X, at Joe Mullinax. Let me know in the comments. Am I being too hard on Santi? Again, I want to stress, I like Santi, and I like that he's here, and I think he earned the contract extension. But it's hard to look at a 6'11" guy and say he's closer to a small forward than he is a center. I struggle with that given the current makeup of the injury report. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode again. Maybe I'm being too negative. Maybe you don't like my tone. I'm sorry about that, dear listener, dear viewer. I'm gonna end with some positivity on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. We'll talk about it next. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It is their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. The swivel screen is a true game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a single beat. And Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It tracks your reps, suggests right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. Plus, they give you personalized class recommendations that keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each and every week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. It is I, Joe Mullinax, closing out this Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being with me on the podcast. Over the last couple of days, I've been accused of being a negative Nancy, downtrodden Donnie, whatever you want to refer to me as, not being positive enough about the current state of play for the Memphis Grizzlies. And you know what? While I respectfully disagree, I'm open to feedback. And I do think that there are some positives to garner out of these first couple of days for the Memphis Grizzlies. First and foremost, you heard Santi Aldama, Joe Morant, guys that interviewed on Monday during media day. You heard them talking about the team being unified. You heard them pulling the strings, so to speak, in terms of having a connected message, in terms of being connected on and off the court, wanting to support one another, the efficient practice that was talked about on Tuesday. That wasn't something that when you hear it, it sounds like coach speak. I want to stress that. Like, my issue with the speed conversation, as I mentioned earlier, it's more so about turnovers and protecting possessions. I don't think anybody's giving false information. I thought Zach Kleiman could have answered a little bit more clearly, as I talked about on Monday's show. But Tuesday's show, excuse me. But I do believe that we're in a space where you can appreciate that Joe Morant and Santi Aldama and all these guys, they clearly are embracing this fresh start. The end of the Taylor Jenkins era was ugly and messy, and it wasn't something that really helped the Grizzlies achieve an end goal. The firing of Jenkins was more so an acknowledgement that the team's season was done. You could argue that Zach Kleiman did that when he traded away Marcus Smart the way that he did. The season's over. Let's do this kick the can down the road move so we have more flexibility in the offseason, even though the team was the 2 seed 2 months ago. That's tough to swallow sometimes. So to come out of that negative energy, those vibes, and to try to rediscover positivity for themselves, that matters. The Jenkins era ended in a very negative way. Isolo's era is beginning on a very positive note. The players are excited. They're engaged. They are focused on the task at hand. And all of that is connected to the early relationships that Tuomas Isolo has built. He deserves credit for that. I am positive that I love hearing about Ty Jerome being excited about this system because I'm a UVA guy in terms of basketball, and I'm from Virginia, and it's great to see another Virginia Cavalier on the Memphis Grizzlies. But more importantly than that, I think Ty Jerome genuinely has a high basketball IQ, and he sees the value of what Isolo is trying to do. He understands the significance of a lead guard in this system. And he knows that while Ja Morant is the lead guard, and we'll talk more about that to close out the show here in a moment, while he understands that Ja is the lead guard, he gets that he is going to have opportunities to shine in this scheme, and he wants to take advantage of them and make the most of them. And he also understands that part of having success in this scheme is having strong screeners. And I want to give Jock Landale a shout out here, because this is a guy that, again, if he's starting for the Grizzlies on opening night, that's probably a problem in terms of Memphis winning the basketball game more often than not. But this is a guy who signed a contract, using his words on Media Day, for life-changing money, and he hated that he wasn't playing. He hated being on the bench. He wanted to be an active contributor in what the team was doing, and he found opportunity in Memphis, and probably even more opportunity than he realized when he signed, because of Clark and Jaren and Edey all being out at the same time. If Landale's not the starter, he's going to play. And his screening and his rebounding, the things that don't jump out in a box score necessarily, but help with getting your best players like Ja Morant going. That matters a heck of a lot in a scheme like the one that Isolo is trying to implement. And we'll close the show talking about Mr. Ja Morant, because as hard as I've been on Ja in the past, as hard, even harder than me, that the national media has been on Ja in the past, the first 2 days of this season have been model Ja in terms of hearing the right things about how he's being a leader off the court, how he's active in these team workouts, how he's doing these interviews and he's interacting with the media and talking about how excited he is. Ja gets it. He is not somebody that is dumb by any stretch of the imagination. Ja Morant understands the assignment. He knows this is a big year for him. He's eligible for contract extensions. This coming summer, he'll be eligible again, and he can sign a big money deal, the likes of which that has never been seen in Memphis, Tennessee, or on a majority of NBA franchises. But he has to get all NBA to get there. He has to achieve certain milestones. He has to play a certain amount of games. This matters for Ja, for him to be the type of guy that the Grizzlies need for him to be a successful team this season. Ja Morant gets it, and he is interactive, and he is engaged, and he is somebody that when you look at the work that he's doing and you listen to the words that he's saying, it feels more aware. Not necessarily of what the team needs, because it's still a lot of talking about what Ja needs and Ja's interactions, but that's just one angle to this. Actions speak louder than words, and the way that he practices, the way that he interacts with his teammates, the way that he competes, that is another way for all of this to intermingle and intertwine too. And so far, so good when it comes to how Ja Morant perceives those spaces, because as I've said numerous times, and I'm going to continue to say it, if Ja Morant ain't Ja Morant, nothing else matters. If you are a person that thinks that way like me, as negative as I apparently have been the last couple of days, you could be real positive about that, because that's what matters more than anything else. Thanks for being with me on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. Thank you for making us here at Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Our old friend Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Literally, it is all good. We are happy to have you with us wherever you're taking in the show. Become an everydayer. Be someone that checks us out each and every time an episode drops. The next time an episode drops, it's going to be Thursday. DeMichael Cole is going to be back with us from Nashville, talking about Grizzlies practice, players that he's talking to, rumors he might be hearing, vibes, how they're feeling around the team. Again, it looks all hunky-dory right now. How can they continue to build upon this positive energy heading into the start of the official preseason games in the next several days? DeMichael will talk about that and more on our next episode. Thank you again for being with me on this edition of the show. I hope you are back tomorrow. Until then, stay locked in. I am Joe Mullinax. We're free and available here at Locked On Grizzlies, wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, be safe. See ya.